Oh, the humanity, for there is news in this, the F1 news cycle, which of course we are going to get to in the next 10 minutes or less. First, we need to talk about Lewis Hamilton. Then we will talk about Maximilian Verstappen, what it means for Mercedes, who are going to get back to the front imminently, some say. And of course, we've got to talk about Ralf Schumacher coming out as gay, queer, the first F1 driver to do so for many a moon. First, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton, because Andrew Shovlin has gone on the F1 Nation podcast and talked to Damon Hill about some things, about the line of travel that is Mercedes getting back to the mountaintop. Most notably, Damon Hill said something that I thought was important. He talked about the self-doubt that Lewis Hamilton would be experiencing at the ripe old age of 39, soon to be 40 years old. We've argued about this already though, haven't we? Some people, some Sir Lewis Hamilton fans say at the age of 39 years old that this chap is in his peak, that he hasn't lost a beat, and how I wish that to be true. However, Damon Hill, one-time champion back in 1996, said this, that typically Formula One drivers peak in their early 30s, and that's why Lewis, losing in quali 10-2 as versus his teammate King George Russell of Kingsling, Norfolk, first of his name, undefeated, undisputed. That's why Sir Lewis, prior to Silverstone last weekend, would have been experiencing some serious self-doubt. Damon Hill says of Fangio that Fangio would always say that you must believe that you are the best, but that notwithstanding, you must always want to be better. Those two theses are in diametric opposition, surely, are they not? How do you juggle both those balls as an F1 driver? And that surely is the predicament that Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton has been wrestling with of late. Anthony Davidson chimes in too, saying that the first thing to go when you are past your prime as a Formula One driver is indeed the pace. You will see that, of course, in quali. And does this not make Lewis Hamilton's his recovery, his triumph last race weekend, all the more glorious? That he's managed to face down adversity and overcome yet again for the umpteenth time in his career to date. What are we doing? This dude is incredible. Lest I start crying and remembering Sir Lewis Hamilton's voice breaking when he tried to communicate his love for one Peter Bonington. Oh, the humanity. Lest we forget the hug, the embrace between father and son Anthony Hamilton and Sir Lewis Carl Davidson. What are you talking about? How do you like your Formula One? Two, during that same podcast, Shovlin talks about getting back to the top, that it wasn't one moment, that there wasn't a panacea or a silver bullet, there wasn't one upgrade or a front wing that Mercedes have tacked onto the car that's facilitated their being competitive yet again, because times weren't always this good as far as the boys and girls over at Brackley and Brixworth, were they? I've been very disparaging about team principal, Toto the boy who cried wolf, because again, I feel like they've fallen foul of technical arrogance. They failed to take advice from Peter Wright, whose counsel would of course have been, as far as ground effect, you must nail the symbiosis of suspension, chassis and aero. Those three things are the holy trinity. They must work in tandem. You cannot go off and build those in silos. If you do that, you're going to fall victim, of course, to things such as porpoising, bouncing, rear instability, and that was the story of the W13, W14, notwithstanding one very fluky victory at the hands of some Red Bull setup ineptitude. However, the story as at July 2024 is that they are rounding that turn. They are indeed climbing that mountain. 2 victories back to back by Mercedes. The boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth surely therefore are testament, proof positive of this. Now again, whether they can continue for that, build on that momentum at the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend, that's another thing. Maximilian Verstappen, again, bound to go well because he's something of a specialist around the Hungaro ring. The F1 Worlds waits with bated breath, watching. Going to be interesting, eh? And Ralf Schumacher finally comes out as the only queer F1 driver to date. Oh, the humanity. What are we doing? First, let me give this chap plaudits. The bravery, again, intangible. How can you quantify that? How are people going to react to that news? Because for the avoidance of doubt, motorsport broadly, globally, is still a very limited space, linear in terms of its demographic, predominantly male and predominantly heterosexual. So for Ralf Schumacher to come out as the brother, as one of the goatiest drivers that we've ever seen at the ripe old age of 49, like, what are we doing here? The bravery is off the charts now. Tell the truth. I do not envy that chap. However, on this occasion, I've got to take aim at Formula One. I know there is racing pride, and they trot out this low-hanging trope. They say all the right words, don't they? Re-racers won, etc. However, how difficult can it be for marginalised people when Ralf Schumacher went his whole career living a bloody different life? What are we doing here? Who cares? You guys are saying in the chat, why in 2024 is this even a news story? It should not be. Why isn't representation a proper thing in Formula One? What's something that we can all be proud of as marginalised people alike? What are we doing? This would be as good an opportunity as any for me to take aim and go scorched earth at the likes of Mohammed bin Sulaim, who talks all the talk and says that they're doing X, Y and Z, when, of course, in real time, in the real world, they are doing nothing of the sort. Ralf Schumacher's case, again, proof positive of that much. But again, props to Ralf Schumacher for coming out, being his true self. And again, this is from a chap of Jamaican heritage. A Christian household is where I come from. And again, homophobia always has a seat at that table. But again, I'm old, grey of beard now, understanding what it is to be a marginalised person. And equality needs to be a bloody thing. Diversity and inclusion needs to be front and centre of these conversations. Sport should be a reflection of the real world, should it not? Should it not? So why hasn't it been all these years? Misogyny, homophobia, racism, sexism, all running rife still as at 2024. What are we doing in the premier motorsport formula in the world? What are we doing? It's nonsense. And again, let me shout out some of those who are living through this in real time. Drivers, motorsports people who have come out, notwithstanding obvious difficulty and trauma. Shout out to Sarah Moore, Abby Eaton, Jess Hawkins. What are we doing here? How difficult for them must it be to live in this space that has been unaccepting of people like them? What are we doing here? Let's see Ralph at the guitar. Oh, visual. I can't read that out, chat. But then this is the problem. How are we doing this? How are we still visiting territories where people cannot be themselves? There was a story last year of people not being able to enter tracks because they had rainbow flags wearing. I don't know. I genuinely, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know what we do at this point. But this needs to improve. We can't be in 2024, especially on the back of the weekend's events, and these things still being allowed to continue. What are we doing? Visual Madeline, he could be bi. I don't think he's made a public statement. He just has a male partner. Well, he did make a public statement and he posted a beautiful picture of him and his partner on Instagram, didn't he? That was the statement, I thought. Jay Madeline, that is what's Madeline saying. Go on then, Madeline. But how can you be gay if you have a wife and son? Isn't that bisexual? Well, Madeline, this is the point that I'm talking to you, yeah, because some homosexual people make a decision because it's so difficult to come out. They decide not to be, right. Decide, he says, that's the wrong terminology. They choose not to be their true authentic self, as I understand it. That's the choice that Ralf Schumacher made, hence why the phrase coming out exists. Oh, the humanity. Props to Ralf Schumacher. F1, we need to do more. The slogans only go so far. Race as one, racing pride. Be about it. Don't say it if you're not doing it. And again, we need to be better as an F1 community in educating ourselves, understanding more, because equality is a right, not a privilege, depending on your sexual persuasion or who you are, the colour of your skin. What are we doing out here? But you know what? I digress.